So, you've just bought a Mac after a lifetime of using Windows, and you're thinking,
What the is this piece of
well, that's where I might be able to help, because in this video, I'll be going over 4 different apps/ways that you can make your Mac feel more like Windows. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Starting off with Rectangle. Okay, so if there's one complaint that new Mac users have always had, is that macOS is just straight out terrible when it comes to window management. Like, I feel like it's one of the few areas where Apple's famous "it just works" motto doesn't really hold, because window management on the Mac does not really work. And in particular, I'm talking about automatically sizing and snapping windows. Like, yes, if you press Option and hold onto this green button at the top of your window, you can technically snap it onto the left or right, but that's hardly an "it just works" approach, especially when you compare it to how intuitive and simple it is on Windows. Now, there are a number of apps that allow you to mimic this window functionality on the Mac, but usually a lot of them are either paid for or they're free for a certain period, and then you have to pay an additional amount to gain full functionality. But the one that stands out from the rest is an app called Rectangle, and that's because it's a completely open source and free app to use. And it allows you to automatically snap windows to the left or to the right. You can even snap them to corners or in thirds. And there are even keyboard shortcuts which you can access from the menu bar at the top. So for example, Control Option right arrow will snap this window to the right. And yeah, the best part about this app is that it's completely free. It is an open source app, so you'll need to head over to the Rectangle website, which I've linked down in the description below, in order to download it. And once it's installed, it should begin working immediately. And thanks to this app, you're never going to have to worry about dragging or resizing windows ever again. It's just sick. Okay, so the next app on our list is an app called AltTab, and as the name suggests, this app allows you to mimic the famous and beloved AltTab functionality that you get from Windows. And even if you've never used Windows before, it's still an app that I highly recommend you check out. So essentially, if you have a bunch of windows from different apps at the same time, there are usually 2 ways that you can view these using the standard macOS settings. The first way is to hit Command Tab, which opens this weird app switcher, but it only shows you the app icons, and there's no way of knowing which window it's going to take you to. Or alternatively, you can activate mission control by swiping on the trackpad with 3 fingers upwards or pressing control upward arrow. And this method does let you preview the windows, but the issue here is one, it can get quite messy if you have, anything more than 10 windows open. And two, if you're working with multiple virtual desktops, it's quite hard to see the windows in those spaces. However, if we install AltTab, which again is another free open source app that you can download through the link in the description, it essentially screen records every window on your Mac's display. So you'll need to give the app screen recording permissions, and it will let you preview thumbnails on each window of each app by holding the Option Tab button. You can also change this shortcut in the app preferences section as well. And you even get details like which desktop space the window is located in. So if you hit Option Tab, you can go forward between each spaces. If you hit Option Shift, you can then go backwards, and you can even use your mouse or trackpad to click on a window. It's just a much more efficient way of viewing all of your windows compared to mission control, and it's a feature that I really do hope Apple will at some point introduce natively, because I know a few people who I've tried to convince to install AltTab that are a bit worried about the fact that this app is constantly screen recording your device 24/7. And naturally, people are a bit sensitive about, should I be typing in passwords when this app can screen record my screen? And I keep having to explain that it's just so that you can preview the thumbnail and gain that functionality. So yeah, it would be great if Apple could just straight out copy this feature at some point. Speaking of copying, the next app on our list mimics another feature that Windows has had for absolutely ages, and that's a built-in clipboard manager. So we've all been in that situation where we've copied something to our clipboard a few hours ago and then later need to refer back to it. And on Windows, you can just hit Windows V to access it. However, you don't get this functionality built in on the Mac, which means that again, you're going to have to install a third-party app to gain this kind of functionality. And as before, a lot of these apps will either be paid for or they'll entail some sort of free trial rigmarole. However, there is one free app that I personally use, which is an app called ClipTools that was developed by Gary from MacMost.com. And by default, this app allows you to access the last 10 pieces of text that were copied to your Mac's clipboard history. And if you go into the app preferences, you can also choose it to restrict certain apps like password managers so that they're not being stored by the app. So yeah, this app pretty much does what it says on the tin. And I guess my only issue with it is the fact that it only copies text. So things like files or images can't be copied and stored onto this clipboard manager. And I think it would also be nice if there was a favorite tab for items that you commonly paste, like your email address or a meme that you constantly send to the group chat. But considering that this app is completely free with no strings attached, I can't really complain. Okay, so this next one is not necessarily an app, but rather a hidden action that I didn't realize existed on the Mac till literally a few days ago. And essentially, it kind of helps get around the whole lack of window previews that you get on the Mac dock compared to Windows. So, obviously, if you're used to using a Windows device and you hover over an app on the dock, you'll see a preview of all the windows for that app. So, you can choose which one that you want to select and open. Whereas on the Mac, there is no such preview. However, if you scroll up using your mouse or with your trackpad using two fingers, it actually activates App Expose, which lets you see all the windows open for that particular app. It's basically like Mission Control that I mentioned earlier, but for a specific app. Now, the only downside is that it only lets you preview windows that are open in the current space that you're working in. So if you had music open full screen in another space, its preview wouldn't show in the dock. But otherwise, it's a pretty good feature that you have if you ever get lost in a bunch of different windows for an app. So that brings us to the end of the video. Obviously, as we've seen, there is quite a lot of low-hanging fruit in macOS when it comes to some pretty basic features such as window management. And yes, whilst there are a lot of apps out there which can help to alleviate these issues, it would just be so much easier if Apple could just introduce these features natively in a future macOS update. It just seems like a no-brainer to me, and it would be one less friction stopping Windows users from switching over to the Mac. As always, let me know in the comments down below if you found any of these tips helpful, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, consider leaving a subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.